Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is DH Thorne coming at you live from Area 51. S. Ben Kane and I are streaming live from S. Ben Kane's Winnebago, somewhere in the middle of the desert. We can't tell you exactly where because we don't want anybody to come find us, but honk twice, Kane, and we'll see if we can get them to come and check out our vehicle. So what's going on, man? It's been a week since we did a live stream, and last time we talked about vampires and all that kind of good stuff. What's on your mind this week? I know there was talk about waffles and aliens and all kinds of weird stuff. It's kind of a goofy stream tonight, I think. We're just going to be having fun.
Yeah, there really wasn't a particular topic that we kind of had decided upon. So, yeah, we're kind of just free-floating. So, that being said, please, we welcome any questions you guys have. As the format usually is, make sure it's all in caps so we can definitely see which are questions and just comments.
Yeah, that really helps. Like when it's in all caps, it kind of makes it so that this way we can pick them out because otherwise we don't notice. And if you have to ask a big question that takes up more than one thing, put like part 1 and then part 2, something like that. That way we can.
Really... So there we go. Okay.
There we go.
Trying to get set up.
We're experimenting with some new streaming software. We got everything kind of set up now so that I can kind of direct things, make it look a little bit more professional. We can switch around between different views, and that means in the future we'll actually be able to put up like slides and things like when we want to show like diagrams or sigils or something like that, or just to make it a little bit more interesting, we can do all that. And of course it's still a little buggy, as you can see. It just decided to resize Kane a little bit, but it'll correct itself in a second. That's not Skype's fault. That's actually OBS's fault.
I know you're doing it on purpose, so you get to have the camera more. I understand.
Well, I'm so much bigger.
Really small.
Well, anyway, so yeah, I mean, we had been talking about aliens a little bit. Was on our mind. I think you had mentioned yesterday the idea of aliens, alien intelligences, things like that. Do you think that would be a good topic for tonight, or do you have?
Yeah, I mean, we can touch on it. I don't think it's going to take the whole hour, but it's definitely an interesting subject. We're dealing, when we're dealing with magic, we deal with a lot of different entities. It's not simply demons. There's demons, there's angels, there's jinn, there's arguably maybe something of a different class being banshees or even wraiths to some degree. And one thing that people forget is that there's also alien intelligences that I personally believe come through in a lot of ritual. A lot of contact has been made with such entities. Crowley actually, it's been up to debate whether he actually did, have any kind of association with the entity known as a lamb. It is an interesting subject. In fact, I was gonna at one point possibly write a book on dealing with the workings of Lamb in sometime in the future, and that's still something that's on the back burner at some point. But at this point, I've got years and years of material I need to write on, and it probably won't happen anytime soon. But it is interesting that we've have, especially like 2019, we see a lot of disclosure happening with alien intelligences, UFOs. Seems like everything's on the rise. The Navy now has openly said they, adding technology to their jet fighters and whatnot so that they can track these vehicles. It's really, it seems to be really prevalent. Definitely something that is making its way more towards the mainstream. And that being said, I would expect that since there is more sightings, more, contact being made, that through magic, that is also a very viable way of communication with them. Lovecraft had talked about such things like this. This kind of falls into the whole category of the old ones and opening portals for this kind of communication to occur. So it is a very interesting subject to kind of consider. A lot of people have had these kinds of contacts with these entities, and to me, magic is definitely a technology. It's not something that is folklorish, I guess, or something that is set only in. I don't really know what the word I'm looking for here, but it's not something. that's archaic. Is this something that, to me, that is an actual technology that is yet to be caught up with, if you will, with science? In fact, science is just catching up to a lot of stuff that magic has already confirmed. I mean, sympathetic magic essentially is, quantum entanglement. So, it's just catching up, and that kind of brings up another point. What happens when magic is actually verified as something that is tangible, that is real, that our energies, our thought, our intent actually change the physical world from our personal reality grid into the consensual reality matrix. Will the witch hunts again occur? And will I have to go live in a cave somewhere where no one can find me?
You're tall, you'll stand out, they'll find you. That's like I often joke around. I say, like, if I ever robbed a bank, like, I'd never get away with it because, like, I don't have a profile that, like, no one, like, that is common. Like, I'm not a normal size, I'm not a normal build. Even if I, like, completely changed, like, how I dressed, I would stick out like a sore thumb. But yeah, I mean,
being
like,
7, it's very difficult for me to blend in.
yeah, exactly. Like, they're gonna be like, I don't know, but he was tall as all hell, and yeah.
Right.
I actually had to do like some cramming today because Lamb is not, I'm not really well read on Crowley or any of his works, and Lamb is something I'm slightly familiar with, obviously. Somebody's saying they can't quite hear me talk, so let me bring this up to my face. That might help a little bit because it's kind of positioned in a different spot. Hopefully you guys can hear me a little better when I do that. If not, there may be something I have to adjust somewhere else. But it's been a night of weird technology problems. I guess, my audio wasn't even working at all earlier tonight. So the fact that it's working at all is kind of nice. Hopefully it stays that way. But yeah, I had to do like some real brushing up on Lamb just to get an idea to remember what it's about. And that's definitely at the center of a lot of controversy like that. People will say like, oh, he was so reminiscent of a gray alien, the way he drew him and the kind of things he was talking about. And some people
Right.
believe, Lamb is not a specific entity, but a class of entity and
Right.
all this kind of stuff. And it is interesting as all hell. I mean, it's one of those things where, growing up, I grew up in the mountains of the Adirondacks every summer. And, you can't be up there alone in the woods and not think about aliens from time to time. It's like one of those things. It's like a country thing. And my father was the type of person where every time we'd see like a satellite go over, he would insist, "No, that's a UFO. It's not a satellite." And I'm like, "All right," like one of those things. But it's
Right.
it's it's part of the territory, I guess you could say.
Right.
So, but it is of interest to me. It's just something I've never really incorporated into my magic per se. That's not to say that I don't think that there's necessarily some overlap or some mesh. It's that part of the problem with me with the concept of aliens and mysticism merged, so to speak, in the same house, is that sometimes, probably because of my own, flaws in thinking, because it's so hard for me to prove the existence of what should be a materialistically obvious thing. Like if I see a UFO, I know it's real, Whereas in the
Right.
spirit realm, a lot of it's internal. So I can be sure of the internal experiences because I see the results. But when it comes to UFOs, it seems to be less tangible. And maybe, one of the things that does come to my mind is that every generation, every culture that we have, generationally speaking, may have been dealing with aliens from the beginning and just calling them different things. So maybe we are dealing with aliens. Maybe there is a mothership up there right now and Malphas is just an alien on an operator. He's an alien operator, and so might be King Paimon and everything else. Now, I don't love that. That's not my favorite theory, but some people believe this. Some people really believe that the spirits that we're talking to are either interdimensional or just space aliens floating around somewhere that are interacting with us through that medium. That is an interesting thought. Do you think that there's anything to that, or is that more fun, or what do you think?
I happen to believe that there definitely are intelligences. I mean, I have to give a shout out to a channel out on YouTube called Secure Team 10. I definitely I'm a follower of that. Definitely check out what's going on, and I like it because it's completely unbiased. The guy that hosts it, he he's kind of unbiased. He's like, hey guys, he gets a lot of different footage in from all over the world, just from people taking videos of stuff, and he doesn't say, hey, it's this particular kind of alien or this or that. He's like, what do you guys think about this? He's very objectionable. I think it's an amazing channel, and there's a lot of stuff that comes in on there. But I mean, the fact that we've got all these kinds of documents and CIA files that are being declassified that deal with this particular subject does make it much more of a reality. I can say that I have not personally seen a UFO, and that really actually bothers me because I've seen a lot of stuff, and that's still on my bucket list.
Right? It's like I've seen shadows appear, like physical shadows, like 3-dimensional shadows, the shadow people.
Right.
Which that's like a but I haven't seen a woo 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 that everybody like every other person says, no, I saw one driving home the other day. No, I saw it. It's pretty wild that some people just don't see it.
Though, I mean, what you were talking about there, though, is there's a difference there. But I think a lot of people forget. You said maybe they're aliens or whatever. According to myth, the jinn are actually interdimensional beings. They're not spirits per se. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the shadow people.
Yep.
And I know when I was writing Smokeless Fire, I saw what would be considered shadow people. I think there's definitely a direct correlation. I don't know if they're the same thing or not, or part of the same family, but I know that there definitely was that kind of activity. I've seen shadow people run down a 10-foot hall, and right. It was absolutely, verifiable to me. So, and we're doing magic, to actually contact these beings. So you've got a direct link there between mysticism and actually something that's an interdimensional being. There's a lot of controversy, of course, over if Lovecraft actually wrote stories or if these were real or whatnot. I think if you were to read my book, The Black Book of Azathoth, you would definitely have a more concrete understanding of the fact of what was going on there. It is in my particular belief that he did actually have contact with interdimensional beings. He was a medium. I give a lot of evidence to back that up. He didn't necessarily choose this. It was something that was kind of opened up to him.
Yeah, but, it was like he integrated his obviously his nightmares, and we all do this. Like as a writer, I integrate my dreams all the time into my work, my fiction and everything. But as an unwitting medium, someone would have a dream like this, not know that they're really connecting with a spirit, write something, and it would be so profound. That's the thing that really makes it, to me, believable, is that this isn't something somebody just read and said, oh, I like this, let's just keep it. This is old-timey, wimey fiction that somehow reaches into a place in us all. As you're saying, there's got to be more to it.
Absolutely. And like I said, as a medium himself, I mean, he suffered greatly for this kind of contact. And a lot of his the same kind of symptoms that he suffered also, McGregor Mathers also had actually suffered when working with what was known as the secret chiefs. And so it's an interesting correlation to see how both of these people suffered from this contact, and yet one is considered, completely fiction. No, nothing happened. But as you said, there's something within Lovecraft's work that is extremely. It touches something definitely deep within one. And actually, I wrote the Black Book of Azathoth for particular people of this path. It wasn't meant to be mainstream. It was simply for people that had actually heard the call, if you will, the call of Cthulhu, as it is. But it's what I call it, this drawing, this call towards working with these interdimensional beings. And it is, in this particular field, I'm in a very fortunate position to talk with a lot of people that do feel this. They talk to me a great deal. So it's, most people out there, they don't really run into a lot of these people. I happen to be in a position where I actually talk to a great deal of them. And this does seem to be increasing with the times. Just like I was saying, in 2019, we've got a lot more contact, a lot more sightings. The Navy's coming out and actually saying that they're studying this stuff now openly to the public. So it's interesting. It's interesting.
I think that, every year there's more evidence of, some kind of something going on than there is evidence of nothing going on. And my whole thing is, I try to walk a fine line between, I don't want to say superstition and fact, but mysticism and spirituality and fact, things that are tangible and intangible. And on the tangible side of the equation, there's not a lot that we can trust. There's a lot of, just like with any spiritual contact, there's not a lot of, you've got a lot of people like me saying, oh, I spoke to a demon or a spirit. but there's no physical evidence to back it up that science would accept most of the
Right.
time.
Right.
But on the other hand, there is this overwhelming belief that there is something out there. But then we have to face some hard problems. We do. And some of those problems are things like the Fermi Paradox, the great filters, the things that would say the universe is this big. We know we exist, so we know life can happen. Although we do know mathematically it is so improbable. Just to put this in perspective, the proteins that make up your biology, if we were to create the perfect conditions on every planet in every solar system, around every star, around every galaxy, okay, trillions and trillions and trillions of worlds, we were to create the exact right conditions, and we were to run the simulation basically from now until the end of time, you would not, by random chance, in all of those worlds, create even one protein, according to the statistics. It would take such an incredible order of magnitude of numbers. We're talking a number with like 100 zeros behind it, of repetitions of the age of the universe to create a situation that would spawn one protein, not even all of them, just one of them that we need to have by random chance. The fact that there's life here at all is troubling to science. They don't like to talk about this part of the problem. They just kind of gloss over and say, well,
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's nothing short of miraculous almost.
Yes. And so the fact that, so we have life here, and there seems to be, at least if there's life here, that means that should imply, although it doesn't necessarily mean it is, but it should imply that there is biological life elsewhere in the universe at some point in history as well as in the future to come. But this begs the question, okay? It took about XYZ number of years for us to form on this planet to the point where we could create radio telescopes and radios and all this. Well, the age of the universe is such that this should have happened at least a few times already. And if it happened a few times, it should have happened many times, really. And that also means that if those civilizations existed, they should have also scientifically evolved to the point where they should take over their whole galaxy, even if they don't have warp drive and all these kind of kooky things that we see in science fiction. Even if they did it the slow way with rockets and taking hundreds of years to get to the nearest star, they should be able to take over an entire galaxy at some point in some way. Since the dawn of time, we should see evidence of their civilizations out there. Even if not in our own neighborhood, we should see whole galaxies that are literally blinking with, McDonald's signs, basically.
In fairness, I mean, they are finding Dyson spheres, and so it is an interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, not that's not verifiable, but it is that we're actually seeing things that we cannot explain. There are different galaxies that are out there that are using radio waves to contact each other that we've found, and they're not natural. So the fact that we are finding water, there's water on the moon, there's water on Mars, there's water on a lot of planets. We look at Sirius. We see the lights that are on Sirius, or what appear to be lights. They're trying to say, oh, it's just salt reflections and things like this, but you don't know. There's a lot of different things that are going on out there. There's a lot of structures. Mars has a great deal of anomalies on it. Anybody looking at that, definitely sees that there, if there's not some kind of a civilization possibly underground, then there definitely was something at one point. In my opinion, now I can't say for sure. No, I personally believe that there definitely still possibly is some kind of civilization there. They're still finding methane, that are coming there. There seems to be some kind of change. Dealing with the atmosphere and whatnot, and what's going on up there. And the thing is NASA's not going to tell us the stuff that we know. They actually they have a clause in place that does talk about how they can withhold information if it's any kind of endangerment to the structure of our society to some degree.
Precisely. So imagine what that would do, even for us as enlightened spiritual people. If suddenly the UFOs landed. Like, our job would get weird real fast, and that's coming from people who do a weird job.
Yeah,
and what if those aliens came down and they gave us one of two options? They said, everything you believe in is bullshit, we can show you why. Or B, yes, these weird, kooky spiritualists have been right this whole time. The universe is a spiritual entity.
Right.
I mean, either way, you and I, our jobs would be significantly changed. Everybody's life would be changed. There would be nothing the same, for anyone. And I think the more advanced, especially the more enigmatic the aliens might become, the harder it is to integrate that into our culture and society. I mean, we have people who they fight over cell phones. They fight over the most ridiculous nonsense in the world. Now they're going to be fighting over, does God believe in aliens, basically. They're going to have Christians who are going to say, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Otherwise we can't work with, your demons or something. You're going to have all this crazy shit going on. So I guess the world's just not ready. I would agree with that. Just like the world's not ready, the human species got a mind that's not ready for a lot of things, I guess. I mean, just look at what we do. Most people couldn't really fathom, present company obviously accepted. I mean, there's obviously a trend, but the average human being just doesn't have it. They're not programmed to accept it, let alone understand it.
Right. And I believe it does come down to structural conditioning of individuals. This brings you back to Don Juan and kind of opening up, cleaning the tunnel, opening up yourself to a different reality, or he's even a book called A Separate Reality, but opening up oneself to, what is possible and kind of eradicating the brainwashing or structuring that has been done, this mental conditioning that has been done to us. I mean, I know personally, there's so many different dogmas that you'd have to overcome these different hurdles. The main one being religion. Even for myself, when I started off on my path, I was baptized and was raised a Catholic and then a Christian, up into my teenage years. So it's not only getting over one's dogma of religion, but also dogma of the known world as it has been described to us, and it's quite challenging, to be able to overcome these different things in order to open up oneself. And that's always said to be the greatest challenge, is the fact that, I this is what I tell my students as well, because this is what I have personally learned, is that the greatest challenges a magician will ever have lie within their mind. And it's accepting, it's understanding, it's processing this kind of information, and it's overcoming these different these dogmatic hurdles that we have built up. So, we've been taught since young, these kinds of beings can't exist. They don't exist. It's all silly and whatnot. Yet we sit here as magicians ourselves. We have obviously overcome a lot of these hurdles ourselves, and so I don't think it's impossible for the human race to be able to, accept and get over these kinds of hurdles. I just think that it has to be done in the right way. And again, I see that there's a lot more hitting the mainstream channel. The general populace is opening up to these things, as more and more generations are coming out. These concepts aren't so alien. No pun.
That's naughty, King. Very bad. I would say, for me, after getting up off of my knees and weeping for maybe a whole week straight, of having it revealed, it wouldn't be that hard for me to accept. I think I would probably, it's one of those things where it's kind of I already knew that. But I think I would weep for relief, I think, really, would be the feeling. It wouldn't be joy. It wouldn't be fear. It would be, even if they were dangerous, even if they were we're going to assimilate you, there's a part of me that would be okay, that takes some of the pressure off. There's another life. But Ender, first, before I get to Ender's question and statement, I want to give a shout out to everybody who's joined us. We've had a lot of people watching already. Let's read some of the names. It's kind of hard for me to see from a distance. Natwashia Johnson, she was happy to be here. Leva Lautenschlager, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Seeking Serpent 6, T. Camilla. Carrie Darkstar, what's going on, sister? We're going to have you on hopefully very soon. We'll get you on maybe next week, too.
Next week, possibly.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, of course, and giving us support as you do as member of the house. You're doing an awesome job. Jafar Seb NW, I'm just going to call you Jafar. I think that's what we usually call you. And Dower Norulric, she's a good friend of mine. Ender Oversoul's a good friend of ours. And that looks like, Suicide Bunny Torres, she had a rough day today. So everybody give her a little bit of friendly energy there. She definitely needs it. So Ender had asked and made a statement that was interesting. He, two of them really. He said, we're becoming a new Atlantis in more ways than you know. And I'd like to touch that separately because I have a very Atlantis and me go back. We'll just put it that way. And what kind of magic would aliens have, and who are their gods? Would they have a pantheon, stuff like that? And I would like to say that, first and foremost, I think that just like our understanding of reality is more, maybe not better, but more sophisticated than people from other times in history, I think that what we would probably find with aliens, I would kind of think personally, would be instead of a trend towards more complexity, it would actually be a trend towards simplification. So rather than having a lot of pantheons, I think they might, kind of like my suspicion is, since I'm a monist, I'm a non-dualist, I believe that all is one and all this kind of stuff. I think that if that were true, if I'm correct in that practice, in that belief system, which I'm pretty sure I am, then those aliens would, if they had the same thing, they would have refined that down to, no, all of these entities are parts of the universe talking to you. They're very valid, but they're not, we don't use them anymore. We've outgrown them. We are now fully in command of our faculties. And that could explain why whatever they use might not be technology as we understand it. It might be spiritual technology. It might be something else. It might not be, atoms and molecules and metals and computers. It might literally be consciousness that they're using as a vehicle. They might be literally creating vessels out of consciousness, and then that could explain a lot of the weird stuff that they do. What do you think of that question, especially that second part of what would their beliefs be if you were just to, create something on a whim?
I happen to follow your train of thought there in the fact that these entities are far advanced than where we are. I believe that a lot of the superstitions here would not exist there. That they are indeed in control of their faculties, in control of their own destinies, and don't necessarily believe, or as you say, have matured past working with these particular spirits. Not to say that they're invalid, but that they've kind of transcended in that kind of way to where they are, in fact, their own kind of gods within their reality. I don't see them as something that would worship anything or I don't know. It seems like they've got their own thing, and this is just my own thoughts on this. But it seems like
I fully agree with that. I think it's kind of weird of us to assume that, like, they would worship something when we are finding, even as what we do, worship is maybe not the right word. It's not the best word. And some of us take that to another extreme and say, worship yourself. These entities are here to help you with that. And that's part of our evolution, perhaps, as spiritual entities. I've never gotten backlash for it. I've had even some Satanists go, you need to worship these demons and stuff. And I know that flies right in the face of everything. They've never been mad at me for for not worshiping them, like bowing down and saying, please save me, go, go. So,
yeah, I mean, that's degrading, that brings us into a whole other conversation, but it's like, that's very, if you will, right-hand path. I'm not worthy to get on your knees, anybody reading like, either Grimoire Pope Honorius or geez, what's the name of the book? Or even, the text of Solomon, or the King, Solomon, a key, the key of Solomon, forgive me. And then the Heptameron also, the Heptameron's grimoire and all these are all very right-hand path grimoires working with spirits, but they're all very degrading to these entities. But also, they're always on their knees saying they're not worthy. They aren't able to. They're not worthy of this being or this power of anything. And I think that's very abusive. And again, it comes back to that religious dogma or abuse that a lot of people are struggling to get over. But it goes back centuries. It goes back since the beginning of time. So, yeah, I don't think that these particular entities would these aliens, if you will, would kind of lower themselves to that. They're able to travel. It's people think that they travel great distances, and that also could be possible. But they're saying that they're interdimensional, and this is why sometimes we see there's footage of these things just simply disappearing. It's just they're just gone. They've shifted into another reality, or they've shifted into another parallel universe or a dimension. They don't necessarily have to travel very far. It's just a shift of vibration. So. I don't see that they would actually be. In my opinion, I don't think that they would be worshiping something, getting on their knees to something, and again, in their technology and their understanding of the universe, would have indeed become their own particular gods.
That's an interesting point. Or another way to look at it is, like, I have a personal theory a little bit that goes along the lines of, I mean, I don't want to get too far into it because this could be a whole episode on its own, but you have biophotonic, communication between the cells of your body. And if we go back to Tesla, we start talking about a non, atomistic.
That's something that's just proven, actually. I have to say that the communication between
using
photonic.
photons instead of electricity.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
If we go back to Tesla a little bit, which there's some fringy science that kind of goes against atomism, which is the idea of atoms and particles. Well,
right.
Tesla believed in the ether, and he believed in light was a perturbation in the etheric field that caused like sound. It's basically light is a sound wave, basically, is the way you look at it. And you can actually still explain it, using his ideas instead of Einstein's and all these other particle physicists instead. So in other words, quantum physics might be wrong, basically, is what they're saying. Might be the wrong path entirely. If we understand the universe as the ether rather than particles, if we understand the universe as one energy field or energy field of different vibrations, then it becomes plausible, if not outright necessary, to understand that consciousness is that field as well, and that consciousness would be filtered in through our biology through these biophotonic mechanisms. So in other words, our conscious thoughts are literally like we're like a robot being piloted by the consciousness of the universe, essentially.
Right.
If we extrapolate that as a plausible theory, even just for fun, to its logical conclusion, then if there are aliens and they are more advanced than us in all ways, they may have come to this understanding and transcended bodily forms and use these grays, use these ships, use these things as nothing more than vehicles for consciousness. And they can maybe materialize them at will because they understand how the ether works, how to make energy, mass, and particles
that's
appear.
Essentially what Whitney Strieber wrote about, with communion. He talks about how they have different layers upon them, and that they have actually been very robotic-like, and that they are synthetic beings, not so much AI, but as you say, piloted by a different consciousness from somewhere else, and that they themselves are not alive. Mm-hmm. So, or there's a combination between living and non-living materials that create these individuals. So it is something to consider. Very interesting.
That's what it is. It's just mind candy, really. I mean, it's there's no way. I mean, you and I, as mediums, as magic practitioners, we can come up with all these cool ideas, and we can ask the spirits, and we'll get our answers. And sometimes they agree. Sometimes they agree very strongly. But I don't think it's really for us to intellectually know. I think it's something that we are to comprehend on a conscious level that is not based in a materialistic, mathematical. Not that those are useless, mind you, but I think it's something that, to put it another way, you can mathematically understand a thing but never have experienced it. And understanding spirit, understanding the higher reality, the full reality, is not about knowing the math, it's about experience. So when we are looking at something, I can describe something for you and say it's 4 centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide, and you might get a picture in your head, but unless you grab it and hold it, you don't know what it's like to experience it. And in the same sense, if a spirit tells us, yes, you're literally just a meat puppet that the consciousness of the universe is piloting, that still doesn't wake you up to the fact. You'll sit there and go, okay, that doesn't change anything. I don't feel any different. This goes back to what you were saying earlier about, reaching these different levels of awareness, understanding, experience, that these beings might have transcended this world that we understand as we understand it. That's assuming they're not just interdimensional, like they come from another multiverse somewhere.
Right.
And there's so many layers to this onion, man. There's so many.
Yeah, and the theory's been proposed, in fact, that that they're actually us from the future and whatnot. So come back to check things out. And as you said, there's so many different theories and concepts. Where do they come from? Is it from a distant galaxy? Is it from interdimensionals? Are they jumping these multiverse planes? So it's you can only speculate, So it's fun to think about and check out and look into. I love the subject. I personally I understand your mathematics and the odds of this and that, but to me, this is such a vast place where we're at, this reality, this sphere that we are in, known as the universe, and there's just trillions and trillions and billions of these galaxies, of these
infinite,
precisely, and the fact that we're the only people or beings on this little planet, that's rather lonesome to think that would be awful, and see, if you want to play the probability game, to me it's like there's no way that we're the only beings that are in this entire place. It just doesn't make any kind of sense.
Well, the good news is, if infinity is the nature of reality, so let's say, for example, the universe is either infinitely big or has infinite multiverse, so that there's infinite number of worlds. Either way, if you have an infinity, that means that anything that is possible happens.
Exactly.
Not just once, but an infinite number of times. So that means if the universe is infinite in size, that means there's infinite enough space for other life to have happened besides just us. The twisted thing about infinity is, and I did this as a thought experiment once, I thought to myself, if there's an infinite number of universes, and those universes have an infinite number of possibilities, for example, the different laws of nature, different this, different that.
Sure.
If it is remotely possible to transfer from one dimension to another, that means not just one person has done it, but an infinite number of people have done it. And not just an infinite number of people, more than likely each one of us has an infinite aspect that has done it. And in fact, if one of our aspects has done it, an infinite number of them have done it. So you're playing with a lot of infinities here, but what it boils down to is, in theory, in one of those universes, since there's an infinite number of possibilities, one of them at least, and if one, then an infinite number of them, should have appeared in my living room at some point and said, "Hi, I'm you." And it's never happened. So this either begs the question, does that mean it's not infinite, or does that mean that there's not infinite possibilities, or does that mean, you know what I'm saying? So we have it gives some hard questions when we do these thought experiments. So by that same token, so what I'm basically saying is, if interdimensional travel is possible, say there's an alternate universe, say there's multi-dimensional possibility, and if the universe is infinite, which we can't know, so that's kind of where we kind of draw the line. But if we assume it is infinite, why aren't they in our living rooms right now? Why isn't there, another S. Ben Kane putting his hand on your shoulder saying, "Okay, you guys figured it out, time to go." We can't, like basically Rick and Morty. How come Rick and Morty hasn't happened yet?
Right. No, I understand that. It's interesting. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about with this particular theory is outlined not in so much in the same way, but it definitely deals with the topic. And it's a book called Our Mathematical Universe, and it's by Max Tegmark. And it's absolutely wonderful to read that book. The learning curve on that is a bit steep, I must say. But if you can really get down to it, it definitely deals with if we go in one, like you say, if we go in one direction, essentially, according to him, one direction far enough, we'll eventually run into ourselves again. And it'll be because there's so many different possibilities and infinite, universes or structures that would be this reality. That as you're talking about, like parallel universes or alternate. I like the multiverse. Every possibility, every choice that we have has been played out somewhere. And so that's interesting to kind of think about all the different possibilities, all the different choices. I don't know that I personally believe that, but it is an interesting concept, and he does talk about that within that book. So you guys should check that out if you get an option or a chance to do that. It's definitely. I love studying reality. I love studying the concepts of reality. I'm a very big holographic universe believer to some degree. I don't believe everything, but it does allow for a lot of things, and it allows for magic, for ESP, for remote viewing, spirits. It definitely fits within the equation very well. So yeah, we've kind of jumped from aliens to where are we? And what are the possibilities?
You kind of have
to. It's kind of, it definitely leads into the other for sure.
I think, that's the fun thing about talking about aliens is it does something to big thing for me is psychology. It does something to people's psychology, their minds, their ability to think. It allows them to fantasize about the unknown in ways that normally are difficult. Normally people, our culture slaps us on the wrist every single time a normal person delves into the weird or the unexplainable, and they say, you've got to keep your nose focused on the grindstone, you got to go to your job, you got to do this, you can't have your head in the clouds thinking about the nature of life. That's what the priests are for. Listen to them. That whole dogmatic bullshit that gets us all fucked up. But aliens is one of those things that it's mind candy and allows the mind to do things and explore ideas that it normally would be afraid to. Or not afraid to, but normally would be completely wrong to do.
Restricted from.
Yes, and I think that's one of the beauties of aliens in our culture, is it allows us, look at how much people have linked the New Age movement to aliens. Everything is linked to aliens somewhere and vice versa. It's an all encroaching idea between reptiles to everything else and everything in between. And it's a very interesting parallel. And looking back in history, we see evidence of UFOs in paintings. We see cave paintings that look like UFOs. The stories of the Sumerians and the Babylonians all sound pretty darn, almost exactly like aliens coming down. So the Egyptians talking about everything, the stars, Crowley talking about, the stars, all these different things. Why? And I think the why is obvious. I think there's got to be, it's either, like I often say, the spirits that we deal with are sentient archetypal energy, which means that they are archetypal energy, which means that they act like an archetype, but they're sentient, they're aware, they're self-aware. Well, in this sense, this idea of an alien it could be thought of as another sentient archetypal, entity. All these different things could exist in the astral as real things. They could exist as organisms, as living beings, as living entities in this energy field.
Not that he was a philosopher, to that extent, but Picasso, believes that he said, there's a quote by Picasso, so everything you can imagine is real. And that's true to a lot of degree. As you said, there's infinite amount of possibilities under some of the theories that we're talking about tonight. And so it's like, yes, if you can imagine it, then at some place, somewhere, it does exist. And that's interesting.
It's also like the dream time. Like when we're talking like, we brought up Castanada's Don Juan. We can also talk about the Aboriginal Australians. There are people, including myself, different days of the week, who believe that there is no difference in reality between the dream and the waking state. It's just a different dream. And, when I'm dreaming, that's reality too. And the funny thing is, when I'm in my dream world, I think this world is silly because it has rules, because I should know better to know that the ultimate reality doesn't have these rules. These rules are just an aspect of this dream. It's just, this is what this dream is about, are these rules.
The construct.
And it's a little bit of a solipsism because you cannot disprove it. It's not, and it makes it sticky, but it functions, it works, it can get you through your day, and it is an explanation for a lot of things. So if we can accept that, like you said, Picasso would say that if you can imagine it, it's real, or something like that. There's definitely truth to it, especially, part of the foundation of my book revolves around that basic premise, maybe not in so many words, but in the idea that the astral realm is all ideas that could be possibly had, and our mind separates them and plays with them and uses them. It's this spiritual energy of ideas. That's what the astral really represents to me.
Well, it's that, yeah. The astral has also been said to be completely constructed of pure information. Almost like a cloud, if you will.
It's form without substance, is the way I see it.
Right.
The material world is the base material world is substance without form. It's just mush, and our brains collide the two things together and create tables and chairs and birds and planes and stars. So,
well, yeah, that goes back to quantum physics. Though. Like I said, there's no equation in quantum physics that you can exclude consciousness from, and that right there ties directly into what you're saying. We're meshing these things with our consciousness. We're creating these things. It's said, if you look at the double slit experiment, it's very clear that everything exists as a wave of possibilities before it is solidified by our consciousness. That's a trip. I love that experiment. I love looking at that, and that goes also back to like light. Light also acts as both a particle and a wave at the same time. And that's our bodies essentially, like you're saying, our cells speak to each other. How we can think as quickly as we do and hold the amount of information that we do has been said that it transcends the physical form of actual storage. So this is something that's transcending into perhaps the astral, that we are connecting to these higher realms, or these different realms. Not say higher realms, but just different, vibrational realms, and accessing these things. It's even been, said that we don't look like this; that our consciousness actually resides somewhere else completely. And as we were talking about earlier, the grays or whatnot could just be driven essentially by consciousness from somewhere else. And it's been said the same thing about us. Maybe we don't look like this at all. We actually exist within someplace else. And that's very Matrix-like. Now that I think about it, it's very Matrix-like, where consciousness actually resides, and where they actually are, and where the movie actually takes place within a holographic universe, essentially. And I think there's a lot of validity to this. So we're just now starting to figure out and make these connections and see how reality is working, how we interact with it, how we create it with our mind. So it's fun. It's just like one of the things I always say to my students is like, okay, so how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Right. And I think that's a hole everyone should travel themselves too.
Scratch your head and walk around,
I really think that's a hole everyone's got to go down on their own. I think that listening to people like you and I is good for inspiration, because I don't clearly have the answers. I don't think you believe you have all the answers at all either. And I think what people need to do is they need to take their experiences and recognize that their experience is all that they can prove or disprove in their world, and just try to flow with it and as best they can. One thing I would like to say, there is alternatives to quantum theory. You do have, again, the ether by, the ideas of, and it's not just Tesla, but there's a lot of others that ascribe to the ether until, the 20s or whatever. It was still on the table as a plausibility. And then for whatever reason, they changed it over to this atomistic idea of quantum theory eventually. Everything became quantum. And the problem with quantum is that they deal with virtual particles which don't exist. So when we're talking about all of these ideas of both spooky action at a distance, the double slit, all of these different things, we're talking about things that fundamentally don't exist anywhere except for inside of a computer or a piece of paper where they write it down as numbers. They're just mechanisms to explain what has happened. So it's kind of like quantum theory is a really good model, but it's not actually what is going on. We don't know what's going on.
That being said, within that, we've got Niels Bohr that is a physicist, and he had said that everything that we consider real is made of things that are not real.
Correct. 100% correct. Because everything you experience is made up in your mind in a way. It's just like going back to Castanet and some other people again. Everything we experience is a language. It's a symbol that we've either adopted or been given or we created to represent the energies around us. And the different vibrations give us different experiences. It's like a desktop computer. You can change what each icon looks like and they represent something else and so on. So there's a lot of different ways you can fuck your brain up if I try to think about this stuff. But again, because Tesla and all these other people, they're dealing with the ether and they explain things as there is no empty space. Everything is basically this energy field that depending upon how
you're talking about the 0-point energy field, essentially. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
That's what the quantum physicists would call it, correct? And in the Tesla idea is, that's the funny thing is someone who's a little bit outside like me who looks at both theories and likes them both for different reasons.
Sure.
I say they're both talking about the same thing, just using different language.
Yes.
But I guess that's for people who think in math and these things. But I would just encourage people to look up the idea of ether and that stuff. It goes back to the golden ratio, it goes back to ether, it goes back to Pythagoras, it goes back to all these different ideas that kind of got sidelined when the cult of science, will say, decided to go with Einstein and all these other groups with the quantum ideas and relativity versus the alternatives. And it's not that relativity is a bad model, it works very well, but that might not really explain what's going on, if that makes sense. So in other words, it makes the right predictions, but you can make the right predictions and not know what's going on. For example, I know if I flip a light switch, the light's going on, but that doesn't mean the light switch makes the lights goes on. That doesn't mean that the light is the light switch. So, yeah. So we've been going for about 50 minutes. Let's see. Does anybody have any good questions or comments for us? Because we'll probably be going for a little bit more. But what do you guys have any interesting questions that you want to bring up? And we'll wait for you guys to give us a response. We'll probably just, we were going to talk about waffles, I think, was going to be our alternative tonight.
The occult properties of waffles and how they influence our life on a very personal and integrated way. Yeah, I think that that waffles are definitely something that I try to maintain within my diet on a regular basis. For their occult I can't even say this.
You like Eggo or homemade waffles? Are you like 11 from Stranger Things? You like Eggo waffles more than life itself? Or?
I actually do like Eggo waffles. I can't say
I do too. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe not as much, but I will eat them with some bacon and everything else. Oh, hell yeah. I mean, we could, that's a fun exercise too. We could, very easily take something like a waffle, right? And we can ascribe all kinds of interesting ideas to it. It's got these little cups that hold the syrup and all these different things. And this kind of has meaning, right?
The syrup. That's what makes a waffle a waffle. You can't have a waffle without cups that hold the syrup, man.
You got to have those cups. I mean,
you got to have the cups.
And they hold the butter so good too. I mean, that's like
right.
Every other little hole has to have butter and syrup. Like that's like
you got it. You got it.
If you eat meat, like you could crumble up some bacon in every other hole, and now you're living like a king.
You know what my mom used to do? This was brilliant. She would cook bacon, but then we had the old waffle maker. She'd actually put the bacon pieces in the waffle and then make it. That right there, I got to tell you.
I might have to hold on. I might need a minute. Hold on. Let me oh God, yes. I'm good. All right. Let me just. There we go. But no, that does sound good. Do you ever have hootenanny? Speaking of waffles, do you ever have hootenanny?
No, I want waffles. No, I haven't.
My wife's gonna be like, "We're having bacon and eggs and waffles tomorrow night, you jerk." Well, French toast is probably the only thing that competes with waffles in my book. To me, French toast.
Love French toast too. Yeah, absolutely.
French toast with brioche, like a brioche bun.
Yeah, I haven't had that stuff in so long now.
Ethan's saying he's going to ship us the rest of waffles. Ethan, we're still waiting for that video of, I think it was Qayin last week, that you were going to do a nice little. You got to do one for the waffles this week, bro. If you need the video file, we'll try to get it for you. Yeah, I mean, I guess we're winding down. I mean, one of the things that we wanted to bring up tonight was I think you and I are both going to be offering some new rights to the house very soon. You had mentioned that. Do we want to talk about that yet, or do we want to wait till they're up? And
we can touch on it, absolutely. I mean, why don't you go ahead and describe some of the stuff you got coming out, and then I'll follow up with some of the stuff I've got. But yeah, there's definitely some exciting rights services being offered here very shortly. It's next week. They should be actually live, so that's the plan of action anyway.
Yeah, we'll do I guess in the newsletter we'll update all that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's another thing we want to encourage people, go to the website and sign up for that. But a lot of people here I know are fans of ours already. They already know about it. Pretty soon, I guess this week, pretty soon, we're going to be doing, with the new rights, I'm going to be adding some new stuff. One of the things I want to emphasize is that I will be doing more custom rituals, because a lot of people ask me for things that aren't on that list of things. And I do have custom goetic rituals down there but people don't notice that right away. So I want to make sure that that's noticed by people, that I do custom work. It's not just the rights that are there. But the new big one that I'm offering is going to be a right to Paimon to help someone who's maybe not adept enough or comfortable enough to create their own familiar entity or anchor it to an object so that they can utilize it. I'm actually going to be offering a service where I'm going to be anchoring a familiar through King Paimon, most likely there'll be other entities that can be used, like Malphus. There's a few others that offer potentially getting familiars. But a familiar spirit that I will be actually putting into an object for you, well, anchoring it to it anyway, so that you can complete the process on your own. I'll be sending that to you in the mail. So obviously you've got to be in the continental US. I can't send something to, like, India or something. The shipping would be ridiculous. But someone in the continental US would be able to get this. You'd get the product at your home after watching my ritual. You would finish it in your own way, with the instructions I give you, and then just follow the instructions and try to work with the spirit and get it to get your attention put on it. So it's definitely going to be. Some people offer things like this, but I think it's going to be a little interesting for people, and I'll be doing probably a video on it next week or the week after once we go live with it to really get it, really honed in there so that people know what it's going to do.
Right.
I'm also going to be offering not full instructional courses like you're doing, but if you want to use my methods of meditation or something like that, I'll be offering something like that to go with it. We're going to be talking about how that's going to be revealed because you have your own teaching services, so that's going to be something separate that I don't want to, we don't want to make that the same thing, but it's going to be more basic stuff, learning meditation and some basic energy work, some things like that. Just a few classes worth, just to get you started, especially if you're reading my book and you're getting to those parts in the book where I talk about meditation or using chi balls and things like that, and you want a little bit more than just what I wrote. Maybe you want to sit with me and on video, and we'll go through it step by step. That's going to be the other big thing that I'm going to be pushing up to the front of what I'm doing. So, and you have something coming out that you were pretty excited about. What can you tell us about that?
Well, like we discussed, doing a lot more custom work. There is going to be a custom write that essentially kind of follows suit in what you're doing there with what you're presenting. And this is something that we had talked about. There's just a lot more demand for it. A lot more interest in people actually kind of customizing what they want for their particular situation or needs. So that'll be something I'm putting out. But I'm really excited about a couple of the other two that I've got. And one is working with the Vampiric Pact, working with Noctulius, which is a vampiric entity from ancient Greece. And that energy is something that working with that particular entity or him is different than the spirits I have definitely worked with, and very, very powerful. So it instills the vampiric essence within one if one follows that particular path, and is very the results that I've gotten with it are pretty stunning, and those that have also undertaken this particular working here recently, which was kind of in trial to see how this was going to work. The results have been quite astounding. And then there's going to be a work presented with Belial, and see, Belial and I can have an understanding with each other, kind of a pact of our own ways. He had helped me out here several months ago, and now I had said it within that working that I would offer a right to the public on his behalf for his help to kind of help spread his influence and kind of put him out there more, so he can kind of work with people more on a personal basis. So that's something that I had, like I said, had agreed to do with him or work with him on. And that's essentially going to be, Belial's really interesting. He's a lot of different ways you can work with Belial. I've had amazing result within court cases, anything that's political to some degree, any kind of business matters. Really, really strong influence in that kind of commerce. Just an empowering or empowerment that he kind of provides, and so that's being hammered out in the finer details of things. But essentially, that's going to be a right that's also going to be offered. So we've got a lot of different stuff coming out. I think that it definitely is going to help the public get a little bit more variety, help them empower themselves through different ways depending on their personal paths. So I'm excited about all the stuff coming out.
Yeah, and I mean, between like the books and everything, I think we're doing some fun stuff. Hopefully my next one will be getting ready by this winter, hopefully before then. I was actually thinking about going through and doing my own editions of the old grimoires and adding my own perspectives to them a little bit as I go through them and figure out what I like and don't like about them and how I use them. So there'll be a lot of stuff we'll be probably announcing in the next couple of weeks, but I'm very excited. Belial is a popular entity. King Paimon is very popular. These are entities that I feel like, if I make a video about, you know, Malphas, I get 100 views. If I make one about King Paimon, there's 1,000, 2,000 very quickly. And these entities, I think, are really trying to get attention a lot lately.
Right.
And
Right.
I really think that, you know, this goes in cycles. You have entities like Keck came back recently and got more attention, and a lot of people, politically speaking anyway. You've got all these entities that will just kind of rotate in and out of our cultural awareness. And they do this on purpose. You know, they do this to stay relevant. They do this to build up a following,
Yes, they do.
and all this kind of stuff. So you know, some people will say, you know, I don't like following trends by other, you know, sorcerers or mages. I don't like, oh, the big guys are doing this, I got to do this. No. I look
Right.
I try to feel the pulse of what the spirits want and what the people are being drawn to, and that's a little bit more important to me. And a lot of times they mesh, but it's really interesting to see that. And you can't go wrong with Belial, King Paimon. You know, all these entities they're just top end entities that everyone seems to want to deal with all the time, and they're very powerful. You know, they get things done in people's lives very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
So, all right, guys, let's see. That was exactly an hour on the button. You have anything else you want to mention? Anybody, Kane? Should we start wrapping up, or do we have any?
Yeah, I think I'm good. I think we've talked about aliens. We could, I'm sure, talk about it for quite some time. I'm sure possibly revisit the subject at a later time. But yeah, I'm aliened out at the moment, and I really want to go eat the Waffles. I'm really hungry.
Go to the Waffle
You know,
House?
absolutely.
Well, we'll have to drive our little Winnebago. Right, from exactly 14 degrees south longitude. FBI, if you're listening, we're joking. Come on, guys. All right, so we'll check you guys next week on Tuesday. We're going to try to do this every Tuesday, so if you enjoyed this, try to check us out on Tuesday. Obviously, go to our webpage for those of you who aren't already fans of ours. Make sure that you go to our individual, Facebook pages, FromTheAshes.com, excuse me, and you can check out everything there. Sign up for the newsletter because we're getting good at that. We're doing that every month. We're going to be releasing, and we try to put articles in there too. It's got a lot of interesting stuff in it. So sign up for that and check out everything we have to offer. If you want to support us, share, subscribe, and comment. Commenting actually helps a lot. For a video, when you like somebody on YouTube and you comment on their videos, you're interacting with it. That actually boosts us in ratings. It's actually good to do for us. So if you have questions, we'll be here.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody. It was a pleasure.